When silence pervades a space accustomed to conversation and dialogue, it's conspicuous, uncomfortable. When silence simply exists from the start, it's far more insidious because breaking it requires rebelling against the threads of habit, nature, and familiarity that keep one's mouth sewed shut. What different types of silencing do young queer Asian Americans undergo, from society, our families, and even ourselves? How are we taught to accept the culture of silence that characterizes our families and communities as a given? And how do we begin to break this silence?
I'm Andrea. I'm 19. I'm half Chinese, half white. I'm gay, and being queer means being part of a community, and it's a really important part of my identity now. And I think it's something that I still have a lot to learn about, but that's really important to who I am as a person.
My name is Pallavi Rudhraraju. I'm 20 years old, Indian American. I identify as pansexual, and what queerness means to me? Queerness is embracing your truth and your identity.
My name is Sam Yu. I'm a junior. I'm a history major with a sociology minor, and I am Korean American. And I identify as gay primarily, but I'll use queer interchangeably, just depending on the situation or conversation. So being queer to me means I see it as taking on this new identity that to me has a lot of substance.
My name is Michelle Chen. I'm 21. I'm a lesbian. I think, sexuality is very fluid, so that could definitely change. But for now, I'm a lesbian. And being queer, what it means to me is just really being comfortable with who you really are, because I feel like a lot of people, they kind of shun the queerness in them.
Hi, my name's Vicky. I'm a senior here at the college. I'm 21. I am an Asian American. My mom is Filipino, and my dad is black and white. So I'm a mixed Asian. My sexuality is, I guess, bi, because I don't really care. Sorry, I mutter a lot. Being queer means to me just being a person. I kind of I don't know, whenever I think of queer, I just think, oh, okay, familiarity. So to me, queerness is familiarity. Let's see, my first conceptions of queerness. It's actually a really horrible story. This one time when I was a kid, my dad was watching the news, and they were talking about legalizing gay marriage. And I was like, Dad, they want to legalize gay marriage? Then I was like, Dad, if gay marriage is legalized, won't the world's population go down? And I was actually concerned, and he just started laughing. So from then on, I was like, okay, there's something I'm not getting.
Back in 2003, when Christina Aguilera released Beautiful, and I saw the music video, and then it showed two guys who looked maybe in their late teens, kissing and being very intimate in public. So that was the very first instance of queerness to me, which I find really important, not only because it was one of the first instances where I saw it and understood it as being these are two gay men, but also the fact that the two guys were white, and that's what was represented on the screen. So that's something that that's really resonated with me as well.
I honestly don't think I really had any role models that were Asian, or any characters that I could identify with in that way.
I'm trying to think of Asian Americans in American media growing up.
It's a challenging question because for me, I didn't really have any Asian or Asian American characters who I could identify with growing up. This kind of has to do with how I identify racially. I always identified as Indian and Asian, but to identify racially as Asian, that didn't start to happen until college, when I started to get really involved in Asian American studies, the Asian American Student Initiative. Before it was more I would say I was Asian when people would say stuff like Indians aren't Asian, and then I was just how dare you? Do you see a map? Do you see the continent Asia? Do you know what that means? And the reason why I'm kind of going off into that tangent is because when I was a kid, seeing an Asian American in film or as a character or cartoon character, whatever it was, that didn't necessarily mean much to me because I couldn't identify with an Asian American. And I'm saying that mostly because most Asian American characters were not South Asian.
Like, I can't put names to it.
Like the real only character that really comes to mind is Mulan, and then like maybe like Jackie Chan.
The really smart, like, exchange student. I guess because of stereotypes, it was hard to relate to any of them. When they did have romantic relationships, it was mostly the women who would. And it was mostly not with other Asian people, and it was almost always with white people. When we do have just Asian white relationships, it first off ignores other interracial types of relationships, and it also kind of makes it so that like whiteness is still the standard that we have to aspire to. I never watched queer movies growing up, and when I say growing up, I basically mean up until the age of 18. And when I did watch queer movies, it was because I specifically sought it out. And those queer movies exclusively had white main characters, and only white people were in relationships and having sex, and essentially there was an entire erasure of Asian Americans and any sort of people of color from those.
I felt like homosexuality was like more acceptable in a white community. Like it wasn't like something that that could be like a characteristic of me, because of my parents being like very traditional culture, always talking about like heterosexual relationships, never breaching the topic of homosexuality. They're like, oh, you're gonna marry an Asian boy. And then I was like, no. And then they're like, oh, okay, Asian American boy. When I first realized that I might be like not straight, I was like, oh man, my parents though. My sister actually got a nose ring in college, and they threatened to like, they were like, oh, we're gonna rip it out of your nose when you come home, and they disowned her. So I'm probably gonna tell them after I graduate, to be honest, after I'm like, oh, I don't have to really depend on them for anything, because I just know that they're gonna take this pretty badly.
Both of my parents are like pretty liberal and like pretty progressive in terms of like politics and stuff, but like we just like never really talked about it. And I think like when I came out and I like talked to my mom who's Chinese about it, it was kind of weird because this stuff isn't really talked about in the Asian community or in China at all, really. They always assumed heterosexuality is my future. So I don't think it ever like really crossed their mind. And it's not because they're like actively like homophobic or like really malicious, but it's just like not something that we really talked about ever.
My dad still talks about when I'm gonna get married and when I'm gonna have kids and when I'm gonna like carry on the family name. So if you haven't guessed, I'm not out to my dad yet, because I'm gonna let that happen when I'm financially secure, when I'm on my own, and maybe when my surrogate mother is in her 3rd trimester. Then I will tell my dad that I'm gay. But my mom knows. The only thing that she did mention, that is a reality I feel for a lot of Asian households, was that she told me that because I'm gay, I'm now a step below everybody in my family, like by default. Because it's sort of like that idea that, you know, the gay child has ruined has like spoiled what my parents have worked for, especially for me being the youngest and the only male. I can easily see this turning into a situation where like my dad and his extended family will see me as like destroying everything they've worked for since they immigrated here. Like I can't carry on the family name, I can't be that model child that, you know, my parents wanted, you know, model minority. I think there's a lot that goes into what a model minority is and how that's sort of, I think, a status that was imposed onto us by white patriarchy, but we don't have to talk about that now. But yeah, I think the model minority myth does affect how people, especially like Asian people, interpret like their queerness or their sexuality, because by having this model minority label imposed onto us, I feel like that carries like an implication of not only are you like intelligent and smart and you don't talk about, you know, like very contentious issues and you like keep out of everyone's way, but also you're straight. I feel like that's there's like a heterosexual like assumption with the model minority myth, which might affect people who may identify as queer or what have you, because, you know, it's one thing to be like gay in our family, but to be gay and unsuccessful is sort of like probably the worst thing possible.
It comes down to their reputation, because I think that my family, like, I think that my parents are amazing people, and that ultimately they kind of understand if they're not gonna get that like straight Desi wedding that they expect from me. But at the same time, it's definitely my reputation that they're very concerned about, because when they made me unfriend my family members, it's because they were like, what if the rest of the family knows you're gay? And that terrified them. Being gay isn't an option for my family.
It has been really hard to try to break the silence between me and my dad and even my mom about, you know, certain issues, because I feel this might speak true to like other Korean households where I sort of have to navigate two different spheres, like when I'm here versus when I'm at home. So when I'm here, I'm just very outspoken about, you know, all these different issues. I'm involved, or I try to be as involved as possible. I try to be as active as possible. Then at home, I'm very subdued, where I don't talk about these things with my parents. It's like I don't feel comfortable talking about these things with my parents. I don't know, because I never grew up seeing my, like, so I guess to compare it to, I guess, maybe my white counterparts, they're able to like talk to their parents and like other family as very casually about these things, like bring it up and like, yeah, let's discuss, let's have discourse. Whereas growing up in my family, I treated my parents with respect, and with that respect involved not arguing with them, so not talking about these contentious issues. So I feel sometimes there is like a cultural barrier when it comes to like trying to break these silences.
Because of the like quiet, like obedient way that we've been raised, especially if our parents are like straight from Asia, it's hard to be open about that sort of thing. Like even just breaching the topic is very hard for very many Asian Americans, because they're like, they've never talked about it before.
I'm hoping that like by being like the gayest, most unapologetic like South Asian person on this campus, that can start to change people and they can stop being so like closeted. I know that there are other queer South Asians on this campus, you know, like I'm just waiting for them to like actually come out, or if not, to like reach out to me later.
I just speak out more, make a little bit more of a scene.
It's just being honest with yourself and honest with your friends. Like if they're really your friends, they'll accept you, like no matter what.
I want to be involved in like in the Asian community as well as the queer community, and because I'm going to be like co-director of ASI next year, and I'm like pretty involved in it this year, I like really want to like start talking more about how diverse the Asian community is, and I think I'm a lot more open about like my cultural background and my like racial identity now than I was before, even in like the queer community. So I'm not as like afraid to like talk about like my differences and stuff as much as I was before. And I don't really have like a concrete plan, but I think just like being really open about those things and being like, I'm like really proud of my heritage and my sexual orientation. So I just like really want to express those things and like communicate these with other people.
Taking advantage of any opportunity that I can, so that to break the silence that, you know, Asian people aren't authoritative or commanding leaders. I think that requires me to really, take advantage of opportunities that might come my way. So, you know, if there's like an exec position that I could potentially take on and do, I'm gonna do it, you know, and if there's an internship that I have the potential to nab and like be a figure 4, I'm gonna get it.